This is the story of Lance Herndon and his death at the hands of Dionne Baugh. This took place on August 9th, 1996. I'll go through the entire story, I'll tell you all the events. I don't really know how to say Dionne's last name. I'll just refer to her as Dionne throughout this whole story. If you do find it interesting, please hit subscribe. Lance Herndon had earned a reputation as one of Atlanta's rising business stars. His company, Access Inc., was a computer consulting firm that earned million-dollar contracts with such prestigious clients as the City of Atlanta and Nations Bank. The 41-year-old native New Yorker was presented with the National Service Award at the White House with then President George Bush in 1988. Former President Bill Clinton, during his administration, praised him for his business acumen. Atlanta Mayor Bill Campbell selected Herndon as one of the city's business leaders, who accompanied the mayor on a trade mission to South Africa in 1995. An African American, Herndon was well thought of in the minority communities for his philanthropic endeavors. But Lance Herndon had a dark side. Those who knew him well concede that the thrice divorced entrepreneur, his most recent divorce had been the previous January, had two major weaknesses. Herndon, he loved women. He was often involved with several women at the same time. And he also liked to spend money on behalf of himself, and he loved to splash the cash on all the women he was dating. But after his death, it was discovered that Access Inc. was essentially broke, and Herndon had already borrowed heavily against a large line of credit he had established with a local bank. Now Herndon, he met Dionne in 1996, and they both quickly started an affair. Dionne, 27 at the time, was married. She was a naturalized American citizen originally from Jamaica. Her husband, Sean Nelson, worked as a pilot for Air Jamaica and lived on the island nation with the couple's young daughter, Amanda, while Dionne remained in Atlanta to complete her college education. She worked as an executive assistant for MARTA, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. According to witness accounts, Herndon wanted to end the relationship with Dionne, though she wanted to continue seeing him. Herndon had actually called the police a month before his life was taken. On July the 10th, Dionne allegedly made a scene outside his home and repeatedly banged on his door after repeatedly seeing Lance inside with another woman. A policeman who responded to this call sent Dionne away, but then Dionne returned the next morning. Police arrested her for a misdemeanor charge of criminal trespass. Although the couple continued to see each other after the July the 10th incident, prosecutors claim that Lance Herndon had made his mind up to break things off with Dionne, but he continued to give Dionne money regularly and allowed her the full-time use of his Mercedes. Now on August the 8th, which was the day Lance's body was discovered, he was scheduled to go with Dionne on a court case regarding the trespassing. Herndon had reportedly promised Dionne, however, that he would appear with her and ask the charges to be dismissed. Herndon himself, his life was taken in his home in a posh suburban area of Roswell, Georgia, on the morning of Thursday, August 8, 1996. His mother, Jackie, discovered Herndon's body after his employees working in his basement office grew concerned when he did not show for work and did not return their calls. Lance Herndon's nude body was partially covered with a sheet in his waterbed in the home's master bedroom suite. His head had been crushed by repeated blows from a blunt instrument. Although the weapon itself was never recovered, the medical examiner later concluded that was likely a large crescent wrench. There were no defensive wounds on the body, indicating that the victim was ambushed. Herndon was discovered lying on his back, his arms folded across his chest, which is the position in which he usually slept, according to the people close to him. His wallet and several credit cards were found untouched on a dresser in the bedroom, although the shirt and pants the victim had worn the previous evening were missing. Now, a body pillowcase, which was perhaps used by the suspect to wipe off blood, was discovered stuffed in the toilet of the master bedroom. Perhaps the most unusual thing about Lance Herndon's bedroom was the fact that all of his alarm clocks had been unplugged. Herndon, who habitually rose as early as 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. every morning, would set 3 alarm clocks. In addition, The phone that was beside the victim's bed was also unplugged. Because the heater in Herndon's waterbed kept his body temperature from falling below 87 degrees, his exact time of death could not be determined. The medical examiner who performed his autopsy, however, estimated that Lance Herndon had been dead about 6 to 8 hours by the time his body was discovered, shortly after 10 a.m. Now, early in the investigation, the police suspected Dionne first, but the evidence they had was too weak. In their mind, it was a case of, let's look at who's closest to Lance first before we try and look at other suspects. Nevertheless, the police kept an eye on her over the next year. Authorities first went to question Dionne hours after Herndon's body was discovered, but no one answered their repeated knocks on the door. After speaking with the neighbor, they left. But the neighbor later told them that Dionne had come over to her house immediately after the police left to find out what they had wanted. According to her neighbor, Dionne said that she had been in the shower where the authorities knocked on her door, which the neighbor found hard to believe considering that Dionne was wearing a business suit, had dry hair, and was in full daytime makeup. Dionne then got into her car and drove away. Her neighbor notified the police that she had just left, and they went to Dionne's home to wait for her return. About 20 minutes after they arrived, Dionne returned home and repeatedly collapsed and got hysterical after allegedly learning of Lance Herndon's death. But according to the police, she shed no actual tears. In her interview with police later that afternoon, and in a subsequent videotaped interview at the Roswell PD 9 days later, on August 17th, Dionne denied knowing anything about Lance Herndon's death. She told authorities that she had driven her husband and daughter, who had been visiting from Jamaica, to the airport on the evening of August 7th and then returned home. She did say that Herndon visited her home around 9 to 10 p.m. the day before his body was discovered, and that he brought her his IBM ThinkPad laptop computer, which he sometimes let her borrow. Herndon then left her home, she told police. Despite repeated questioning, Dionne stuck to her story that she never went to Lance Herndon's home the night he was killed. She also maintained that her relationship with Herndon was solid and that she and Lance were truly in love. But the authorities learnt that her version of events were not matching up with what others told them. Finally, in January of 1998, police got the break they were looking for. Dionne was in the process of a divorce from her husband, and police learned that Dionne had spoken to her mother-in-law, Barbara Nelson, a few weeks after the murder. During the conversation, Dionne allegedly admitted to her mother-in-law that she had indeed been to Lance Herndon's home on the night he was killed, despite the fact that she told the police she wasn't there that night. Dionne was arrested and charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, 2 counts of theft by taking, and financial transaction card fraud. If convicted of either of the murder charges, she faced life in prison. Now, according to the prosecution, their theory was that Lance had grown tired of Dionne and did not want to see her anymore. Authorities claim that Herndon had told some of his friends that he was wary of Dionne's controlling, obsessive behavior and that he wanted to get rid of her. But by August 7th, claim prosecutors, Dionne had realized that her days with Lance Herndon were numbered, and they say the evidence suggests that she was not a woman to be trifled with. Prosecutors also believe the combination of anger and greed was fueled by Dionne's August 8th court appearance. They theorize that the final straw may have been that Dionne learned that Herndon no longer intended to fulfill his promise to appear in court and drop the charges against her. Personally, I do think the prosecution's case there is a little weak. I don't think Dionne ever cared whether he turned up in court or not. I think personally Dionne was too hurt by the fact he didn't want to see her anymore and he's already seeing other women. According to the state's theory, Dionne went to Lance's home around 7 to 8 p.m. on August the 7th. They believe the couple had sex, and that Dionne straddled a dozing or unsuspected Herndon and hit him over the head with a large heavy object. Prosecutors say Herndon kept a large crescent wrench in his house, but it was not found after he died. After taking his life, prosecutors claimed that Dionne, in Lance's house, took a shower to wipe off his blood. She then helped herself to Herndon's jewelry and one of his credit cards. They say she then unplugged the victim's alarm clocks so that they would not still be going off and attracting attention when Herndon's employees began to arrive at work around 7:30 a.m. Only someone familiar with Herndon's sleeping and working habits, like Dionne, say prosecutors, would have known to unplug the clocks. And that is a key point in the story nuance. Only those who slept with him or spent time with him would know of his alarm clocks. So now, if Dionne isn't a suspect, it would be any one of the other girls that Lance was probably seeing. Several of Lance's intimates say Herndon normally slept on his back with his arms folded across his chest, the same position he was in when his dead body was discovered. But the medical examiner said it's impossible for Herndon to be in his natural sleeping position after such a brutal attack. Therefore, authorities theorize someone familiar with Lance's sleeping habits would have had to have placed him in that position so that it would appear as if Herndon were murdered while he slept. Prosecutors also say that before she left the house, Dionne went downstairs to the Access Inc. offices where she helped herself to Lance's IBM ThinkPad. Although he had sometimes loaned Dionne the laptop computer in the past, his co-workers claim the meticulous Herndon would never allow the IBM to leave his office without his protective case. Yet the case was later discovered in a storage closet in the office. Dionne freely admitted to police that she had the computer, claiming that Lance had brought it with him to her home the night of August 7th. She also claimed that Herndon often loaned it to her without its case. Neither Lance's jewelry or the murder weapon were ever recovered. Police theorize that Dionne disposed of the crescent wrench and possibly the jewelry as well when she left her house on August 8th after learning that the authorities wanted to speak to her. But the credit card that prosecutors claim Dionne stole from Lance Herndon did surface again. The defendant used it on the morning of August the 8th. This was before Lance Herndon's body had been discovered, and it was a phone order which was a display cabinet that cost nearly $3,000. Prosecutors also point to forensic evidence they say proves Dionne committed the heinous murder. Head and pubic hair samples collected from the defendant matched similar hairs found in Herndon's bed. DNA found under Lance Herndon's fingernails matched that to Dionne's DNA. 2 crumpled gum wrappers found at the Herndon home resembled gum wrappers later found in the defendant's purse, and a piece of leafy vegetation found on Herndon's bedroom carpet appeared to match a similar piece of vegetation found on the floorboard of the Mercedes Dionne drove. Police know that Lance Herndon was at his home at 9 p.m. on August the 7th. His ex-wife, Janine, dropped off Herndon's mother, who was spending the night with her grandson. Phone records show that he made or received phone calls off and on throughout the evening, including 2 calls from Dionne and then one he made to Dionne at 10:53 p.m. The defendants claim that Lance Herndon came to her home, located at least 20 minutes away between 9 and 10:30 p.m. that evening, was seemingly impossible. All this evidence, the prosecutors said, confirmed that Dionne was a greedy woman who took Lance Herndon's life. Dionne's lawyers were quick to point out that most of the evidence against their client is purely circumstantial. Though they were willing to concede that Dionne has not always been completely truthful with authorities, they insisted that the prosecution cannot meet its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Dionne is indeed Lance Herndon's killer. Even though the police did say that when they visited her home on August the 8th and she was quite dismissive of them, she was trying to avoid them, the defense argued that Dionne was in fact cooperative. After speaking to her neighbor and learning that the authorities wanted to question her, Dionne did call the number the police left behind from her cell phone after she left her house. When she returned home and found the police waiting there, Dionne agreed to speak to them and even allowed them to do a quick search of her home. She also volunteered to authorities that she was in possession of Lance Herndon's IBM ThinkPad and promptly handed it over to them, even though they were likely not even aware of its existence. The defense also rejects the prosecution theory that Dionne was angry that Lance was about to dump her. They say that the lovers had continued their relationship after the July 10th incident in which Dionne was arrested outside Lance's house. In fact, defense attorneys said Herndon bailed out Dionne the next day. He also assisted Dionne in finding a lawyer and even called the police to try to get the charges dropped. Added to his promise that to attend the August 8th court hearing on her behalf, the defense contended that his actions do not suggest that Lance Herndon was trying to distance himself from Dionne. They also disagree with the prosecution's contention that the forensic evidence is strong evidence against Dionne. According to Dionne's lawyers, crime scene technicians also found hairs in the apartment that did not belong to Dionne or Lance Herndon. These were hairs that were never matched to anyone. Dionne's lawyers also claimed that some of the other evidence, such as the gum wrappers and leafy material that may have been left behind by Herndon's killer, is much too generic to be specifically tied to their client. In addition, none of Lance's blood was ever found on any of Dionne's clothing, or in her home, or in her Mercedes car. Particularly, there was no blood on the IBM ThinkPad she handed over to the police. DNA found under Lance Herndon's fingernails was definitely identified as that of Dionne, but her lawyers insisted that this shouldn't surprise anyone, given that the victim and defendant were having sex on a regular basis. And even if Dionne did go to Herndon's home on the night of August 7th and have sex with him, it doesn't mean that she killed him or was present when he died. The defense also said that the credit card she used was one of many that Lance had given her to use freely. Dionne claimed that she and Lance had together looked at the furniture in question a few months earlier and that he had given her his permission to charge it. Herndon had also given another credit card to Dionne earlier in their affair. The defense also argued that their client is not stupid enough to charge nearly $3,000 on a dead man's credit card the very morning after brutally murdering him. According to Dionne's lawyers, there were plenty of other people that the police could have focused on to try and find who did this. Kathy Collins, Lance Herndon's main girlfriend, was the woman that Dionne saw with Herndon on July 10th. Collins claimed she was at a restaurant with her niece the evening Herndon was killed, but police never bothered to question the niece to see if she could back up Collins' alibi. Another of Herndon's girlfriends, Talana Caraway, had a boyfriend named Jazz Williams who had once had financial dealings with Lance. Williams may have been jealous of Herndon, the defense argued. And a car resembling the one owned by Caraway was seen in Herndon's exclusive subdivision by one of his neighbors around 4:45 on the morning of August 8th. Herndon had once been a partner in an Atlanta nightclub called the Vixen Club, but the partnership had ended in litigation, and Herndon's ex-wife noted that her husband had a lot of enemies. In addition to his big and lavish home in Roswell, Georgia, police were informed that Lance Herndon may have had a private secret apartment in downtown Atlanta, but police never checked out this apartment or even verified whether or not it existed. The day before the murder, one of Herndon's contract employees was overheard making threatening statements about Herndon. Norvel Harris had been involved in a dispute over salary payments that Harris claimed Herndon owed him. While it's possible that none of these would have ever turned into suspects and it would have turned into nothing, the defense argued that they still had an obligation to at least question these individuals. The defense also went on to say they neglected to do so as they rushed to judgment regarding Dionne. That same sloppiness has infected the entire case, the defense claimed, a case that the prosecution simply did not have enough evidence to prove. Now, on April 17, 2001, the jury found Dionne guilty on all counts. But then, this story takes a big twist. Defense lawyer Gay Quinn made a motion for a mistrial, charging that prosecutor Clint Rucker was not licensed to practice law in Georgia. The allegation was true. Rucker's law license has been suspended because he failed to pay his Bar Association dues. Rucker claimed the non-payment was an oversight and said he was embarrassed by the situation. Judge Jerry Baxter denied the mistrial following a hearing on the matter. Dionne was sentenced to life in prison, but that all changed when her lawyers successfully appealed her case. On July 10, 2003, the Georgia State Supreme Court found that hearsay testimony by lead investigator William Anastasio had been erroneously admitted during the trial. Anastasio had been allowed to testify to statements made to him by Herndon's employees and girlfriends, as well as Dionne's mother-in-law, and to compare these statements to information given by the defendant. So on November 8, 2003, after this appeal, it went to trial, and then 4 days after deliberations began, the judge declared it a mistrial because the jury were deadlocked. Eventually, in September 2004, Dionne was set for a third trial, but she pled guilty to the reduced charge of voluntary manslaughter. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and Dionne was eventually released in July 2011.